He hired an interior decorator. I didn't say that right, did I? Is considered to be one of the first absolute monarchs in France, so no dingy furniture like him.
I didn't say that right, did I?
Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Today, I'm going to give a quick, informal history of one of the places in France that I really want to visit, Versailles. Today, Versailles is a World Heritage Site that draws in millions of visitors from around the world, but in the past, it was just a place between Paris and some guy called Louis' house. Around 1607, a guy called Louis, no, not that Louis, or that Louis, nor this Louis either. This Louis went hunting in the area and must have really liked the area since he bought some land there a few years later to build a hunting lodge. This Louis was not just any Louis. This was Louis XIII, King of France. So he, of course, couldn't rough it at a mere village inn when he was on a hunting trip. Later, he must have realized that a mere hunting lodge was also unsuitable for a king of France. So he decided to upgrade his hunting lodge to a chateau made of brick and stone. A couple decades after Louis XIII died, his son, King Louis XIV, decided to rebuild the chateau to be bigger and better. This was likely an easy decision since he was a king, liked the area, and had access to cheap labor since he made his army do the building when they weren't at war. They were also put to work building when the army couldn't go to war, such as during the winter. Kind of like, hey everyone, congratulations, the war, and or summer, is over. Now help me build a new wing for my palace. Louis XIV added several new wings to the palace and commissioned a landscape designer to create the gardens. He hired an interior decorator to paint the walls and ceilings, and even bought some furniture of solid silver, including an 8-foot-high throne. Throne likely costs less than a gaming chair costs nowadays, especially for the level of comfort and everything. Also, Louis XIV is considered to be one of the first absolute monarchs of France, so no dingy furniture for him. Later, though, he was forced to melt down his furniture since he got into a war with Europe for 9 years. Yeah. He was so powerful that most of Europe had to form a grand alliance against him, and together they fought the world's first global war for 9 years. As time went on, Louis XIV continued to enlarge Versailles. He constructed the Hall of Mirrors to basically show off how awesome he was. He's known as the Sun King, so he needed a really grand palace to show off. The Hall of Mirrors, actually, has become one of the most famous rooms in the palace, as several historical events have happened there, and the room is really grand. Louis XIV had a son named, of course, Louis, but Louis XV, all he really did was build a few more buildings and remodel a little. However, during the reign of Louis XV's son, named, of course, Louis, in this case Louis XVI, a couple of historical things happened in the palace. The first was the Peace of Paris was signed there, where the United Kingdom recognized the independence of the United States. The second was that a bunch of people from Paris walked to the palace and besieged it because they were angry about the price of bread. since Louis XVI didn't really have any money since the crown was deeply in debt, and he was the crown. As absolute monarch, he was basically the government. And he was deeply in debt due to poor spending choices and other poor financial decisions. Therefore, he couldn't buy them much bread as they besieged the palace. In fact, some of his fiscal policies, such as the deregulation of food, had actually made the prices of bread skyrocket in the past, causing riots. So, he was really not popular by this time regarding bread, and definitely couldn't afford to buy them all much bread. Anyway, the people besieging the palace were very happy and made him go to Paris, where a few years later they guillotined him and sold his property at an auction. After this, the palace became unused. Napoleon Bonaparte didn't want to pay to renovate the palace when he was Emperor of the French, so he never lived in the palace. Also, he was busy fighting wars with most of Europe during his time as emperor. Then, after Napoleon, the next king of France, named, as usual, Louis, in this case Louis XVIII, couldn't afford to renovate the palace either, so neither he nor his successor lived at Versailles. The final king of the French, named Louis, wait for it, Philippe, decided to turn Versailles into a museum during his reign. The next big event that happened at Versailles occurred during the Franco-Prussian War. During the war, the Germans were a little bit more efficient than the French, so they invaded France and occupied Versailles. Then they went to the grandest room of Versailles, the Hall of Mirrors, and proclaimed the German Empire. Afterwards, the war ended, so they went back to Germany, doing a quick detour to march through Paris. Later, after World War I, the Germans would again go to the Hall of Mirrors, but this time it was to sign a peace treaty acknowledging defeat in World War I. Then, during the 1920s, the palace really needed to be restored. The restoration was funded in part by a philanthropist named John D. Rockefeller, who's actually better known for running an oil company and being rich. France has continued restoring the palace to its state when Louis XVI left the palace, way in the past. Currently, Versailles is owned by the French state and is a historical monument. It's also used by the government to revise the French Constitution and for their presidents to sometimes make speeches.
We will make this assembly the crossroads for public consultations. The state...
If you like this quick summary of a Wikipedia article, then please hit that like button and subscribe. Also, comment down below if you learn anything cool. Thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Thanks.